Okay, so I have created this module called as network. This is where I'm going to be saving my storing my different uh, code block to create my three things: VPC, subnets, and security groups. And the reason I'm doing this is so that I could reuse this configuration for different use cases. For example, if I want to create a Lambda, I want to create ALB, because every time you want to create any resource anywhere using Terraform, you need to have these things configured. So I'm putting this in at a central place, central file, so that I can actually reuse it into different modules or root folder. So to start with, this is pretty straightforward, right? You have to have resources, resource, and then in resource you have to mention the name of provider or the name of the module which you will be using to create that resource, and then the actual user defined name here. So here, let's say you want to do what, AWS VPC, and you give a name. Let's say I'll use the word demo VPC, and then you have to define the whole configuration. So CIDR block, then you have to define the DNS name, all those things. I'll just copy paste for quick. Instead of this, I just simply say name, and I'll explain that later. Next thing, or I'll simply say demo VPC. Okay, the next thing I need to do is subnet. By the way, if you're confused about what to give here, what are these what are these things, you can always first go to AWS, try to create a VPC manually. So when you do that, you will have to configure a lot of things. But still, you may have a doubt about, okay, manually it is happening because everything is very perfectly displayed on the AWS console. But how I will configure the attribute values for that specific provider, which is AWS here. Now, to do that, you can always go back to the official documentation. So you go back here, you say AWS VPC Terraform, and this is the documentation for that specific provider, and this is where they tell you how to use it, what is the example usage. You click on attribute reference, and it tells you about what each of this attribute is all about. Okay, so this is how basically you know what to call, how to call it, and blah blah. So DNS host name, support, and tags is the four things which I have configured, and I can do the same thing for my subnets. I can do the same thing for my security groups. I say AWS security group. I'm not going to be explaining this entirely because we did this uh, in the previous session. So I say AWS resource, and then I give a name of, let's say, demo security group, or simply let's say sec group. This doesn't matter. Or maybe I just copy paste the settings, which is, I think, faster. Security group, I'm going to be removing this for now. Simply say demo security group. I don't want this. Let's keep it clean. Okay. In the VPC ID, I have to know where to attach this to, right? So that VPC ID, I'm taking a reference from what I already created. So I have AWS VPC. You have to always refer the name of it, the name of the provider, then the name of the resource block, a custom name. Let's say I'm giving it a name so that you know it can be anything. This has to be AWS VPC because you are using an official AWS provider or module name. This you can give your own name, demo VPC, and then you have to put this string here. So VPC ID at runtime, जो भी VPC यहाँ से बनेगा, whatever VPC ID which will be created, that is something which you will pass on here in the VPC ID. Okay, so AWS VPC, then demo VPC, and then the ID. It will be automatically configured. Okay, next thing you will do is create a subnet. I think, let me just copy this. So now I have my subnet also created like this. Here also I will say demo demo subnet. Okay, let me give it underscore, which is the right naming convention here in Terraform. I say demo VPC, and then I will give it a name as demo VP demo subnet. I'll give this name to it, demo subnet. Okay, so now I have these three things already created. Now, next thing which I need here is, so I have VPC, I have subnet, I have security groups, which I've created, but I need to configure it some way, right? So first thing, in any main script, you always have to define one more thing, other two more things, which is the provider settings, right? So what is my provider here in this case? My provider is the AWS. Yeah, so I'll say Terraform, uh, Terraform, and then my required provider is this one, which I think is a bit old. So I'll say similar to 4.0. Okay. The next thing which I need also is to mention that I want to use this provider. So I say I want to use this provider, which is my AWS, and I'm configuring the region also here. I can also provide the credentials directly here, which is not, but not the good practice. So it will automatically will fetch it from my .aws directory. There is a file called as configuration file, or sorry, credentials file. So it will locate it. But if you are not setting it there, then you can directly set directly under this segment. You can say AWS credentials, secret access key, and AWS access key, AWS secret key. You can directly configure here, or you can make it available into the environment variables directly in the shell where you are running this. Let's keep it clean. So I'll not do it directly here. Okay, the next thing which you would do is setting the module. So I will say module, module, and I have to find the name of the module. So let's say I'm saying module network. Okay, so why I'm saying module? The reason I'm saying module here is I want to call my methods, right? Because I want to create a VPC, subnet, and security group. I want these three things, right? Now I have kept these three things in my module, which is this one, right? So I need to find a way to call them. To call an existing module or existing source block from that module, you have to place this module block, and then you have to start writing the locations. I'll say resource, source, not resource, the source. Source is equal to, I need to go one folder up, double dot here means one folder up. And then there I have to go to a folder module, then go to network, and that's where my module is. Okay, so that's the only thing I need to mention here. And then I have an option to pass the variables. You remember we talked about modules. Modules is similar to a function. So this is your function definition, but you can pass the value from it, and you can pass the value to it, and you can expect a return from it. To pass a value to it, you have to define it at the top. So I'm saying variable at the top, and then I have to define the name. So let's say I'm saying environment, and then I have to define what kind of environment is. And then I can also define the default, that if something is not passed, then it will use the default value. Okay, so for example, in the case of environment, okay, where I can use it, I can then use it in my resource block. So for example, I come here, say demo VPC. I think this is okay, but I can then use my brackets like this, and I say environment. Okay, so it will, how it will look now when it's going to be created, it will use the value which is being passed to environment, and it will append it like this. And then my actual VPC name will look like dev demo VPC. Okay, or I can put it towards the back. Okay, so instead of this, maybe I will do this. It will call as demo VPC environment as stage. Sorry, environment as whatever I'm actually passing. So right now default value is dev, but I can pass it, whatever value I pass it, it will be taken here. How will I go and pass it? I'll go back here. Not here, sorry, here. We close this. And I will pass it from here. So I can say environment and the value as stage, or let's say UAT. Okay, so I have created a module network. The source, I have mentioned the source as network. I think there is a typo here. Network and the environment as UAT, and it will go back here in the environment. This is where it will be saved. The environment, the value will become UAT, and then it can be used directly like this. Okay. Now the same thing I can do with the, as for the return, I can define the output. What is the output of this? I can say the output is, let's say, VPC ID. The output defined as value, AWS VPC, which is this one, dot demo VPC, which is this one, return the ID. Okay, so when I do that, I will also can directly use this variable outside to get the value of VPC. Rather, I will use the name as return VPC so that you know this is returning a VPC ID. Okay, I'll come back. So now my VPC subnet security groups are going to be created just like that. Okay, now let's see how it works. Okay, let's try to run this much. I say cd my ISC, sorry. So I say my ISC and then Terraform, and then I say class demo. Okay, now here I say Terraform apply. Okay, there's an error network. This module is not yet installed, right? So I have to do a Terraform init first. Very good. Init. Okay, the directory could not be read for module network at main TF. Source is module. Okay, I corrected this. Network. Okay. Module network. What's wrong? Provider module network module. Unreadable module directory, unavailable directory, symlink, else set module, no such file or directory. Why I have inside? Huh? Can I open the class name? Class demo and the VPC subnet and okay, where am I? Where is my main? Huh? My main is inside class demo. This one. So I'm saying go one level up. Okay, why I'm saying one level up? Oh, I'm sorry. So I have to say the module and network. Oh, I'm sorry. Go inside one dot and then init. Okay. So this will initialize my provider as well as my module. Okay, and then I say Terraform init. Oh, why I'm saying Terraform init? Sorry, my mind is not working to the fullest. Okay. So invalid reference module network be set. Okay, source is demo VPC name VPC environment reference resource. I must follow at least one attribute access. This specify the resource name. So there will be demo VPC which is Demo VPC, right?
Below.
Demo subnet.
I think the one above this. AWS VPC
Okay.
ID.
Line number. Okay,
Line number 39.
Okay, so one error I got this one. I think this is okay. No, still the same SMS for at least one attribute access, VPC, demo, VPC, name, VPC. Ah, what I'm missing. Okay, let's go back again. Demo VPC, the name I'm saying as environment, ID. This is coming line number 13 actually. So let's go here. Okay.
Akash, this is demo hyphen VPC or demo underscore VPC?
No, this is supposed to be just
13.
getting appended. This doesn't matter. I am trying to append this directly in the values actually. Environment. I think it has to be var.environment, not just environment. Yeah, I think this is where I was making a mistake. Yes, it appears that was the mistake. So whenever you want to reference a variable, you have to say variable.env. Okay, so if var has to be there, otherwise it won't know it's a variable or something else. Anyway, I say yes. Okay, so now my subnet is also ready. Okay, meanwhile it's created. Let's try to add our Lambda function. This is something which we already did. I will copy paste that again. But before that, let's try to segregate it. So instead of saying it's a main, let me divide this further. So I'm also trying to explain you the right way of doing this. Okay. So now I'm going to rename this. Let's call this as provider. So provider means I will only keep the provider information there, which is only this one. And then I will copy paste. Let's say it's a Lambda. And here I will only keep the Lambda thing. So I will remove the provider part and I will only keep the subnets part, which is this one. And from the provider, I will remove these things. Okay, and then in the Lambda, I will remove the gateway. I will only keep the Lambda thing. For Lambda, if you remember, last time when we did, we had to do a lot of things. We created Lambda function, we created Lambda roles. So we created one IAM role, we created an IAM policy. Then we did some attachment to IAM policy, and then we created a Lambda function, right? So all that code I'm going to be reusing. So I will just copy paste, which I love. So I will just do this. Okay, I'll just quickly explain. Okay, so here in the Lambda function, I created an IAM role and I created an IAM policy. Okay, because for Lambda to work, it has to have a policy so that it can publish its logs back to the CloudWatch, and that is what I had to do. So I have created a policy and then a role so that Lambda can assume the role, and in that role I will have a policy, and then I also have to do a role and policy attachment. Okay, so these three things I have to do for my Lambda to work. First, a role has to be created, then a policy has to be created, then a policy and role has to be attached, and then Lambda, once it's done, then Lambda can come to this role and then automatically assume this role, and the moment it assumes the role, it will also have the permission in terms of its policy, and that's how Lambda is able to publish the logs back to the CloudWatch. Okay, and then here I have a Lambda function. This is Lambda function which I have, and then it will go and create the Lambda function. Okay, one thing. Now in the Lambda function which I go and create, I will have to modify something, which is the subnet and the security group. Now this subnet and security group is coming from here because this is where my module is. So I have to reference it correctly. So instead of I copied pasted and it is copying it from somewhere else, I will write it directly. Okay, so now I have to pass a subnet. Where is my subnet is being created? My subnet is being created in this module, which is this one, right? So I have to call this. How will I call this? I will say module dot, then the name of the module, which is this one, and then what it is returning. So if I go back here, if you remember, I created an output, return VPC ID, but I also need to create another output so that it returns the subnet ID. Return subnet ID, how it will return? AWS subnet, which is this one, then the name, demo subnet, and then its ID. Okay, so then I am also returning subnet ID, and then I also need what? Security group. So I also need to return the security group. So I'll say output. Oh my God. Return. Okay, code is already there. Return security group. And same thing I'm doing there, saying value AWS security group, which is this one, then the name of the security group, this one, and then its ID. Okay, so this way, basically I have an option to return whatever I want to return directly from my module. So 3 output, just 1 input. Now I'll come back here. How will I reference it? I say module because it's returning from a module. So I say module dot module network. So I say module dot module network. I say dot, and then it should show me the return values. Okay, so I say return. Okay, it's showing me here. So I say return. This is subnet, right? Subnet ID, and then the same thing I will do here. Module dot module network dot return the security group, like this. Okay, but this is not enough because I'm uploading a zip file, so I need to uh, upload a zip file, right? So I have to go and create a folder similar to this one, my Python. So I have to create a Python folder, Python, and then inside that I have to have a file app.py. Then let's zip it, cd python, and then let's zip py. Let's zip the app dot zip from app.py. Okay, as if file is added, good, and then I think we are good to go. But before that, let me make some changes to my Lambda function so that we can distinguish that it's different. Let me change the names here, okay? So I say example role is okay, policy is okay, but then maybe it can clash from my previous example, or maybe it's okay. Example Lambda, I'll say demo, or maybe just do it. Demo role, demo policy. Okay, demo Lambda, then handler Python is okay, Lambda function is okay. And here I'm output. I'm also then creating a Lambda function URL, which I think I don't need to, so I will comment this. I don't need the function URL, so I will not create it. Okay, now let's cd and let's run Terraform apply. Okay, very good, because there is no URL, then there cannot be an output, so I will remove that. Okay, now the module error again, reference to undeclared module security group. Okay, there's an error here. Okay. Okay, yes. With your Lambda, okay, create function, request ID, because no identity-based policy allows the Lambda. Oh, I see. Okay. So two things here, okay. Um, Let me pause the recording so that. So instead of using the default user, which is currently using, which only has these two permissions, I want to use Lambda user, which has all the permissions for Lambda and API gateway. This I've already configured in my credentials file. Now what I will do next is I will go to provider, and in the region, I will say profile as Lambda. So I will mention the same value which I configured it in my local, in my .aws credentials file. And now if I run this, it shouldn't complain because now it will use my Lambda user. Yes. Um, Now the error is upload file must be non-empty zip. Okay, I think I made mistake while I changed something. File name is path module. Function name is dem. Function name actually should not be demo lambda because that the name is already. What did I change? Oh, it was okay, I think. Python app.zip, Python app.zip, Python app.zip, app.lambda handler, function name demo lambda is I think okay. Python app.zip, okay, what's saying? 53. 53, creating lambda function, create function, invalid parameter value exception. Upload file must be a non-empty zip. Why it is no, shouldn't be empty. Oh my God. Okay, I created app.py, but I did not put any code there. I'm sorry. So I think I need to copy the source code. Okay, so for Lambda, Python app.py, let me copy and paste it here. This is exactly the same code uh, which we did last time. So Lambda handler, a function name, and then it should just return hello, Akash. Okay, and then now I will go delete this, and then I go to C Python zip app.zip from app.py. Okay, cd Terraform apply again. Huh? What did I do now? No module call name module is declared in the root folder. Oh, okay. Yes. Meanwhile, it runs. Let me, because we are towards the end, because we want to cover API gateway also. Let me quickly create another file and let's call it API gateway. API gateway.tf. Guys, give me a minute. Okay, in the API gateway, here what we will do is, okay, in API gateway, what is it which you manually created? So whenever you have a doubt how we have to start from, you always first try to create it manually and see what is it which you had to do to create it, to create an API gateway, right? So you went here, you first created an API gateway, then you created a resource, right? Then you created a method, then you did some integration of method with the function name, right? All these things which you did, and then you eventually you deployed it. When you deployed it, you give it a, you created a stage, and then it gets deployed, and then you got the URL, right? So that same thing we'll try to do now. We come here and we just try to write what is it which you need to create. So first thing is you need to create a REST API. You have to give it a name. Then you have to create the resource endpoint, right? Then you have to create the method. Then you need to create an integration. Integration means you need to connect. How will you connect it with the Lambda, right? Lambda integration. So that part, and then eventually you have to deploy, and then you will output the URL, right? These are the steps which you need to do. Okay, pretty simple, straightforward. You start with resource. You start with the resource. You say AWS API. So I'm getting this IntelliSense. You will not get it, but still you can search with the respective keyword. So API gateway, REST API, and sometimes it gives IntelliSense also. I'm not sure why it's not giving now. If I simply say resource, okay, wait, resource. Okay, you will see something like this, and then here you will say AWS API gateway, and then you will get all the direct calls directly coming here. Okay, so you need an AWS API gateway REST API. AWS gateway REST API gateway REST API. This is what you need. Okay, and then you have to give it a name. So I will say I will say API gateway, just like that. Okay, and then you can provide the name and this and that. Okay, so remember the beginning, when we created this, create API, you have the option of REST API. So to configure this, you say REST API, then you click on build, then you have to give new API, name, endpoint, and all those things. Same thing you have to do here. So you say, what is the name of your API? I say my name is demo API gateway. Yeah. Then I say description, demo API, whatever. Okay, and then I have to provide the endpoint configuration, and here I can say type regional. Okay, the same thing which you said here. Okay, if you have doubt where to get this, where to get that, I already told you, you have to search it in the configuration documentation. So you go here, you search it like this, and you will get it exactly how to call it, what to write, attribute reference. It will tell you exactly how to call it, what are things and how to use it. Okay, I will go back. Then, so REST API is created. This is my REST API. Then I have to create the REST API name and REST API. The both are one and the same thing. And then you have to create the resource. Okay, so I'll do the same thing. I'll say resource, and name. I'll give here AWS API gateway. API gateway resource. Gateway resource. Okay, I'll use the code directly. So REST API ID. So REST API ID means here what you originally created at the top. So it's API gateway REST API, the name API gateway, and then the ID. Then the parent ID, which is the root resource ID, which I'll explain in a minute. And then the path part. So path part here is the same which you used before. So if I come here, I'll give a name, whatever name, create API. And here I need to create a resource, right? This is what I'm doing right now. So create resource, resource path, proxy resource, all these things what you do from here is what you are trying to do from here. Okay, so here I'll say the path part as, let's say, hello. Okay, then I need to provide the method, right? Post that you always were saying, let's say hi here, create resource. Then you had to create a method, create method, right? And associated with Lambda function. That's what we are going to be doing next. So I'll say resource, and I say AWS API gateway method, API gateway method, which is this API gateway method. Okay, and then I can define what method I need, what format I need. So there are different, again, different attributes you can provide here. If you have doubt, you always go here, search for it, and you will get it. How it can be used, what different values you can put here, stage name, and all those things. Attribute reference will have more details, which are here. Okay, so I go back again. What are the three, five, I think four things I need here? Okay, so REST API ID, which is AWS API Gateway REST and the API Gateway, and then the ID. Okay, then I need a resource ID, what I want to connect it with. Resource ID is coming from the same place, dot ID. Then I have to have what method I need. I'm saying I need quotes get and authorization as none. None. Okay, so now I have my method already created. I have REST API ID, resource ID, HTTP method, authorization. The only difference between, see, the in Terraform and when you do it in with console is, in console, a lot of things are clubbed together. So when you say adding a method, for example, or adding a resource, then you uh, can do two, three things together, and then you won't feel a difference. You don't have to really integrate it or connect it. But when you do it from Terraform, it can be done in different ways. So everything is a different resource, is a different resource, and then you create it separately, and then you do one more resource block to integrate them. So that's what I'm doing. I'm creating a REST API, then I'm saying it's a different, I create a resource, then I create a method, and then I will have to do a integration. These two things are actually clubbed together in the AWS console, but here you have to do it separately, and then you have to link it together. So now I will say in the integration, I will say resource AWS API gateway, API gateway underscore integration. Here I say, let's simply say integration gateway Lambda integration. Okay, now here's a catch. Now you have to define which specific Lambda you want to connect this to. Okay, so here also you kind of do the same thing. You have to define the REST API ID, which is AWS API gateway, and all this is something which is not new. This is all coming from the top. So I define REST API ID like this, and then I say API gateway, the name. Okay, I think this is not the right example. So it's not API gateway. Okay, API and then the API. Okay, this is right. This is right. Then the method. This is okay. Sorry, this is okay. Then I will go say resource ID, which is this one. Oh, sorry. Resource ID. This one is equal to Okay, I'll use it. Resource ID as API gateway resource, which is this one, and then its ID. Then I need an HTTP method. Which HTTP method I need? So I need this HTTP method which I created, and then I need to define the integration HTTP method, which is actually the get, and then I need to have a URI. URI is how I define where, okay, this is the wrong string. I remove it. So in the URI, I need to define what is my Lambda function URN. So that is what basically I need to define here. So where is my Lambda function defined? My Lambda function is defined here, right? So I will call this. So I'll come here, I say Lambda function, and then dot my name of the Lambda function, which is example function. So I come here, I say dot, and then I will use the invoke ARN, which is this one. Okay, and that's about it. But I think I need to provide a type also, which is AWS proxy. AWS proxy here means that AWS will allow all the traffic which is coming from outside, and it will proxy it back to my API gateway. So you need to define the type as well as AWS proxy, and then my integration is done. The last step here is deployment. So I will use resource. Come on. Resource, AWS API gateway. I'll use the whole thing because we are a bit late. So here I'm saying stage name as dev, or I can say stage name as UAT. It depends on the integration, which is okay. And the REST API ID, I've defined that I need to deploy this REST API, which is I created here, this one. Okay, now my Lambda function is already up and running. Let's just quickly see if it's up and running. Sit here, functions. Yeah, demo Lambda, this is up and running. Right now, it cannot be accessed because there is no function URL here. Okay, I'll go back. I say Terraform apply. This time, let me auto approve because we don't want to say yes and yes again and again. Okay, so we created the whole infrastructure. Provider has the provider, like because we are using AWS. Then Lambda, I have module used here. So this module is creating my network, VPC subgroup, subnets, and all. And then I'm creating the policy, attaching the policy, and then my Lambda is going to be created. And then the last step, I use API gateway. So in the API gateway, I am simply doing the API gateway stuff, REST API, recreation of the resource, creation of the method, linking the resource with the Lambda, and the deployment part. What I didn't had is the output. So let me do the output. The output here is my, what do we call it? API gateway URL, gateway URL, and the value I need to define that I need an AWS API gateway deployment, which is this one, dot invoke URL. This is basically what I want also. So I can basically run the command again. It will not do anything. It will maybe just print the output, which I could have still seen directly from TF state. But it's okay to put this line and run it again. Okay, so this is my URL, which is printed. If I go here, click on open, the URL opens up, missing token. But if I say hello, UAT hello error, I don't know why, what endpoint I said hello, right? Okay, it should have worked. Maybe some networking problem somewhere. Hello, internal server error. I don't know, maybe the Lambda function is corrupted. I don't know. Python app.zip, app.py. It is supposed to show hello Akash. Let me quickly see if I can very quickly fix it. Demo Lambda. Okay, the function is there, which is okay. Then if I go to my API gateway, and here, if I go to demo API gateway, in the get, it is pointing to Lambda integration, and in the Lambda, method response. No, I can quickly do a test here. Let's do the test. Okay, the test gives me internal server errors. That's why it's giving me internal server error. Okay, so it is not able to reach the Lambda function which you originally created. Demo Lambda is having some problem. So Lambda function is having a problem. API gateway works fine, but the Lambda function has a problem. Let me try, otherwise we just do it later. So Lambda is fine. The connection is a problem. Okay. See, I'm trying to debug it. What's the problem? So Lambda function is working fine because it is returning it. And API gateway is also working fine because when I run it from the URL, it works basically. So if when I ran it from here, it works. So internal server error it's giving because I'm also getting the same thing from here. So that means API gateway is reachable. It just API gateway somehow is not able to access my endpoint. Let me see why. I think I know why. Because if I say hello, is it listening here? No. Okay, I don't appear to know exactly why at the moment, but there is something missing. Demo app, edit. Demo Lambda app is also good. Demo here. How is it being tested? Okay, at this point, I say hello there. It should point back to the right resource. Oops, sorry. APIs, demo gateway. Hello will come here to get authorization none, API required none in the method get. It will come here, none, API required none. Integration requests is also okay. Okay, I don't appear to know what's the error, guys. Okay, let me maybe fix it later. But there is something minor, basically. That's what I can feel. Okay, guys, I don't know exactly what's the error, but there is some connection problem between the API gateway and the Lambda. Anyway, it has been a bit long session. I think entire 2 hours. I'm not sure how much you understood, how much you can really do here. But my suggestion is that whatever I shown you, try to do this first manually. First, try to create a Lambda function manually. Try to create a API gateway manually, and then connect it, and then try to use the script which I have just demonstrated how to use. So you can try it using this in 3 parts: provider, Lambda, API gateways. I've written the steps. So this I will not commit. I will commit. I already have this, which works. This Lambda function, which is the folder which I have here. The same thing I have done here. So you can try it. This also works, and you can make it up and running. By the way, I also have to tell you something on the backend about the TF state, storing the TF state in the backend server. But I think it's for the next time. This I will try to cover next time. Okay, questions? Any questions? No.
So last time
Uh,
our Terraform